I think if you're an adult, a rational person, and you were to tune into Vice President Harris's interview with Brett Baier on Fox News, you would have the takeaway, even if you didn't support her, of, all right, she did solidly. You could think, oh, but she was being dishonest, deceptive. But you have to acknowledge, if you're just doing political analysis, that's a pretty solid performance in that interview, especially given how hostile Brett Baier was. Well, now, as I guess we describe him, MAGA comedian Jim Breuer, he had a very different take. And he did funny. He did humor to express that. See what you think of it.
So the Fox guy goes, 70% of America says we're heading in the wrong direction. And what do you have to say to those 70% of Americans? And Donald Trump's been running. Her handlers are coming out.
And I do have more to play for you. I'll show you the actual clip he was referring to, but to discuss this, and he'll be joined on the show for the rest of today's show, Jessiah from Pondering Politics. Great to be with you. What? It's so awkward. What is wrong with him? Didn't you say before we started that you used to actually admire him?
Okay. All right. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't say anything about admire. Luke
No,
is overstating it, trying to throw me under the... He's like, Jessiah, didn't before you the show, didn't you say that you
would stand by him for the rest of time? I'm pretty sure you said that.
Is your longtime favorite comedian. You think he's funnier now than he was then? Okay, so now that Luke is trying to destroy my credibility with the Luke Beasley Show's audience, I got to recover this, okay?
That's funny, I mean.
So here's the sad thing. And I encourage you guys to go take a look. Jim Breuer used to be a very high-profile name in stand-up comedy. I think he had a stand-up in 2004, which is one of the funniest I've ever seen. He's a great impressionist. The guy used to have a really funny sense of humor. Unfortunately, he has since become, as Luke pointed out, a very deranged MAGA comedian. It's the same thing. Roseanne Barr used to be funny. Now I don't know what the hell she is. She's so far off the rocker. It's the same thing with Jim Breuer. I think, unfortunately, some people, and I should say this, I think celebrities are entitled to their political views. I say that as somebody, I like Taylor Swift, and I love that Taylor Swift endorsed Vice President Harris. I love the fact that she endorsed President Biden in 2020. I love it. And they have a right to make their political preferences known. The problem is when they let their political preferences just mutate the craft in which they reside. So in this case, Jim Breuer used to be a very funny comedian, and I don't care if he's a conservative comedian. That's fine. But he has allowed his political beliefs to just warp the actual craft itself. And this is where I think he's gone way too far, to say nothing of some of the offensive jokes that he makes, you know, but and it's certainly his abuse of fact, right? He's so far away from a factual basis as we know it. But this is unfortunately where it leads, where your political beliefs warp your entire worldview. And I think there's a reason that Jim Breuer is not the same household name he was 20 years ago.
I think that's what happens. I think sometimes these folks fall out of relevance, and that can really harm your mental health. I understand. That can really warp your mind to be on top of the world and all of a sudden less relevant. And then, as a lot of adults do, you spiral into some online rabbit hole, and you get super conspiratorial and super MAGA, and then the combined effect of you really want relevance again. You know MAGA will give that to you if you'll say the right things, because they don't have very many celebrities on their side. And then
they've got Kid Rock, Luke. Luke, come on. When Taylor Swift endorsed Vice President Harris, they're like, so what? We've got Kid Rock and Scott Baio in your face, Luke.
I saw someone say, we like our MAGA women better, and it was Taylor Swift split screen with Alina Hava, and I was like, okay, what is this? Very strange. But you combine the fact that MAGA gives them this positive reinforcement with they have gone down a rabbit hole, and you get what we've seen from Breuer. I think Roseanne Barr is a really good example as well. Before getting to another Breuer clip, here is Vice President Kamala Harris's actual answer. According to Breuer, it was that, just a bunch of noises. Here's what she actually had to say.
Look at where we are, though.
They say
on plans for the American
we'll
people, I'm offering a plan to deal with affordable housing. I'm offering a plan to deal with what we need to do to strengthen small businesses, which are the backbone of America's economy. I am offering a plan that is about taking care of young parents and giving them the support they need. My plans for the economy will strengthen the economy, as have been reviewed by 16 Nobel laureates, Goldman Sachs, Moody's, and recently the Wall Street Journal, which have all studied our plans and have indicated my plans for our economy would strengthen our economy, his would make them weaker, would ignite inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. Those are the facts.
Why do you use your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years, so what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we have been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about
pollsters,
turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade, people have become. But listen. Over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president, one, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
So, Jessiah, a little different than, and I know some MAGA people go, come on, you just don't get humor. Oh, the woke scolds don't understand jokes. That's not it. There are some things that I've belly laughed at that I would not be comfortable telling you all that I laugh so hard at in stand-up comedy because of the edginess of the jokes. I get that really harsh things can be funny. That's not what Breuer's doing. Breuer just shouts and makes noises. As another example before Jessiah gets to respond, here's Jim Breuer again.
The vaccinators, you were real cocky a couple months ago. You got vaccinated. Got my second shot April 19th. I can't get sick from the corona. I'm vaccinated. See this bucket of virus? I'm vaccinated. I'll even lick metal. I'm not afraid of anything. And then the news cockatoos come out. Watch the news, watch the news. Trust the experts. Trust the experts. Trust the science. Trust the science. CDC, CDC. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Fauci. Mask on, mask off. 2 shots, 1 shot. Mask on, 2 mask. Comply, comply.
6 foot safe.
Do what you are told. It is for your safety.
Yeah, that's not. I remember a friend of the show, David Packman, referenced whenever he covered Jim Breuer a while ago. He said that Jim Breuer now is funny to someone who has spent all their time watching paint dry and then their whole life has just been sitting in a blank room and then is thrown in front of Jim Breuer and they can go, oh my gosh, he's making faces and loud noises. This is funny. This is not funny to anyone who has ever seen a real joke or heard a real joke.
No, and again, I'm just thinking the world of comedy. And listen, I understand and respect people who can separate the art from the artist. Again, the problem is that Jim Breuer has allowed the two to have this sort of inextricably incestuous relationship. There's no untangling it at this point. It's unfortunate because many of the actors I like, James Woods is a great example, legendary actor, also somebody who was part of Mensa. I mean, just this brilliant man who has just fallen down the right-wing MAGA conspiracy rabbit hole. I mean, he is just a shadow of his former self, but an amazing actor. At the very least, though, when you hand him a script, the last thing I saw him in was an action movie 10 years ago called White House Down. He was already kind of conservative at that point, but he was reading off a script and performing. Jim Breuer, again, has injected the politics right into the craft, which has degraded his comedy so much. Some people are able to keep their green beans and their mashed potatoes separate, but to your point, he's trying to convey something about Vice President Harris is simply not true. This idea that, again, that she's unfit for office, that she's unable to answer questions, that she panics, and that she's, unable to be asked tough questions is simply not true. That appearance on Fox was a true masterclass when you consider the circumstances. Brett Baer is a tough interviewer, right? I mean, he's not a stupid guy, and he cranked it up, the aggressiveness, with the constant interruptions of a sitting vice president. I remember a time where if you had interrupted Donald Trump or George Bush, Republican presidents, how dare you? They're the sitting president of the United States. You treat them with respect, but it's gloves off when Fox is interviewing Democratic presidents and vice presidents. And yet she acquitted herself perfectly well. Not only that, she caught him in a gotcha, and then the next day, Bayer basically had to admit that she caught him in a gotcha.
Yeah.
That's how well she did. And so none of this just makes much sense at all. And I think that you're starting to see why there's such an asymmetry in the quality and the celebrity status of the celebrities who endorse Democrats versus Republicans. Because the last thing I'll say, Luke, is maybe Taylor Swift will change this. I don't know. But even though she has made her political inclinations clear, and thank God she has, again, we're Swifties here, she's not like dedicating her next album. Like her next album isn't like F the filibuster. You know what I mean? Like it's, which maybe it will. Taylor, if you're watching, I want to be credited in the liner notes. That's right. But she's not, her songs are apolitical. And so I don't know. I think that Jim Breuer's degradation is something that it's really disappointing because, again, you guys go back and watch what he did in 2004. It's a night and day. Totally different guy.
Fauci! See, I can do it too, Jim.
I know. And Mag would be like, oh, so great, Luke. Great. Yeah.
That's what disturbs me the most, Jessiah, is how much the people are laughing. When it cuts to the crowd, they're... He's making funny noises, but there's not a joke there. I don't get what okay, they encourage us to take vaccines, and then we found out Republicans after that were dying 2x that of Democrats, obviously because they weren't taking vaccines as much as Democrats. That's funny to you, not to me. I guess.
Right. What's the joke there? What's the
people were the ones who made the better decision because we survived more. What the heck?
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, what's the joke? Like the punchline is that the people who got the vaccine were less likely to get infected, spread the infection, and die as a consequence of the infection. How is that the punchline for a people who identify with the group who was getting infected,
Jessiah,
infecting others, and dying at a higher rate?
No, you're missing it. You're missing it. Because Fauci! That's why.
It's honestly, it's the same thing that I hear with the word woke. I mean, think about this. I'm sure you guys you've all watched these comedians, and listen, it is a common trope in comedy to make fun of woke. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that there have not been some cringe things on our side of the aisle in an effort to be inclusive. I think that even people have gone back and said, you know what, we kind of went overboard in how we were approaching this noble goal. Right. But then I feel like comedy is overcorrected because I've watched stand-up specials where just everything is just complaining about woke. And it's like if they say the word woke, people burst into laughter. I'm like, that's not, you actually have to tell a joke. So somebody like Bill Burr is a really good example of a guy who I think does it right. He is loved by both the right and the left because he does comedy that some might construe as conservative, but he never just exclusively rags on the left or woke or college campuses. He doesn't indulge in these tired tropes that you see from so many comedians, lazy comedians, quite frankly. And again, I use that as a contrast to somebody like Jim Breuer. So I think there's a reason. And people can say, well, it's you young people, you all don't care about comedy, you all are easily offended. I'm like, no, Bill Burr is, again, a good example of somebody who is loved by people of all generations. It's just you got to be funny.
Yeah, okay, of course, especially when you're doing a show, it's all being recorded, and I'm hyper mindful of what it is that I'm saying while we're doing the show. And in my personal life, I'm pretty mindful of what I'm saying. Again, when I'm just dead alone and I'm watching stand-up comedy, my concern is not, oh, I need to feel offended at the parts that are offensive to people. I'm just sitting there waiting to be entertained. And if you entertain me, check. And so with him, when I watch these clips, it's not like I'm thinking, to your point, all right, does this pass the woke test? He could say something terrible, but if it makes me laugh, it made me laugh. I'm watching him and I'm just confused. Why is he doing what why isn't he making any jokes? He's just yelling. But you said something really interesting, and I've contemplated this a lot. It's interesting how, of course, there are people that have gone too far in wanting to restrict comedians, at least socially, through social pressure, from making jokes that honestly are fine, but because they're not woke enough. Of course that happens. The whole cancel culture thing. Of course, there are examples of quote-unquote cancellations that went too far. But what happened was, while I think... But then often people say someone got canceled and then they go do huge tours and they're comedians. I'm like, okay, people can be mad at you. They're allowed to scream at you. You're allowed to scream back. That's all within our rights. No one's violating each other's rights. And if you go out there and you have an audience that loves you and you're making jokes that some find offensive, all right. But what started to happen was the response to sort of cancellation woke stuff was just stripping all the comedy out and only leaving the political message of I hate woke. And there's some stand-up people I've seen where I'm just uncomfortable because they just want to prove how they can say the thing that everyone thinks you're not allowed to say, which again, but it's not funny. So make it funny and then maybe you have a joke there, but it'll just be trans people.
Right.
I'm like, what's the joke? It's just observational humor. I don't know what.
No, it's so strange. Yeah, I've seen, unfortunately, so many of my favorite comedians kind of do the same thing where the whole thing is like, you're not supposed to say this, and I'm going to say it. And it's like, you just did, and you're making millions of dollars off it, so I don't know to what extent cancel culture is affecting. But here's the other thing. While you were saying that, I was thinking, you know somebody who has a real allergy to comedy? Donald Trump. Remember when he was president and he never attended the White House Press Correspondents' Dinner where the whole point is that the sitting president, Republican and Democrat, gets roasted? Right? President Biden sat through all of them, and he was made fun of by Trevor Noah and other comedians about his age and mental fitness and everything else, and he sat there and took it.
And his age, 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 and his age.
Because he's old. Did you know that? Joe Biden's old. Right, like, but he did. He sat there and took it, and he laughed along, and he would also participate because the tradition is that the president also makes remarks, and he or she would make fun of the comedian who's about to make fun of them. But Trump wouldn't participate. He's so thin-skinned. He wouldn't participate in that either, that rich tradition. And so going back all the way to conservative notions or MAGA Republican notions of comedy, I think it's just wildly inconsistent. And the only thing that really makes them laugh, at least like the real diehard, most cultish members, is just whatever happens to insult Democrats. That's it. Be it in the form of a well-executed joke or just random squawking noises, to your point, courtesy of Jim Breuer.
Right. And the final point on this is, at least for me, it doesn't go the other way. If some left-wing comedian went on stage and went, I bet MAGA's going, Donald Trump, I wouldn't find that funny. I would just cringe like I just did listening to myself and regretted the last 5 seconds of that. And so maybe put some humor in there. I don't find it, even if you're insulting people that I have an ideological difference with, it still has to be funny, Jim. Okay, that's enough. They get the point. Jessiah, where can people find you?
People can find me, apparently Jim Brewer's biggest fan. Thanks for that, Luke. They can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics, one word. Love the collaboration, Luke. Appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely.